All right, welcome everybody to another Wildwoods Beekeeping Chat, and tonight we are joined by Bruce Jenne in Dothan, Alabama. Bruce is not too far away from me in Dothan, Alabama, so we're good to have you on here, Bruce. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Grayson?
I'm doing good. Just been busy with the bees, because now we're here in May and everything's kind of picking up, like the flow. How are the flows down your way? I know you're just a little more down south than we are, but not by much.
Well, it kind of varies. In some of my bee yards, they're really starting to pack the honey in, and in others, they're not doing a whole lot yet. And so I hope we have a good tallow flow. Our privet flow has been somewhat of a bust, at least in some of my bee yards. But I broke into a few of my backyard bees, and they had some honey packed in there. So we've got apparently we have privet here in Dothan, and I don't know. It's weird how some areas are just better than others when
Yeah.
it comes to the honey flow. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, we have some good pine pollen, like I talk about on our other live streams. We have like a lot of pollen, like pine, because our house is covered with, we have a circle around pine trees everywhere, and we have a good pine flow around here, so the bees are able to get things pretty good, which is very good. Bees are
Yeah,
able to get some good flows, and we've been getting some good honey flows. I've been getting a lot of honey
we're good.
putting in super. So it's been pretty good. So
What do you
before we
think? What kind of flowers do you think it is? Do you know?
I know we have some sunflowers. Like I said, we have pine. We have a honey knuckle. I think that's the flower, honey knuckle. I forgot the exact name. I'm not really the flower guy. I know there's people who know a lot about flowers, but I'm not really the flower person. But
Yeah, here in Alabama, you're probably getting some privet and just some of the early flows coming in. And I
yeah,
don't know if you guys have the tallow up there, the popcorn trees they call them, but you probably do have some around there. I just would have to get up there and see what's going on. But
yeah,
if you got honey coming in, that's what matters. It's
yeah.
right now is a big time for that, and we should be just starting our. Right now we should be right in the middle of honey flow. Right now is when they should start packing in for about a month or a month and a half. Now is when the honey harvest pretty much happens around here. So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get some honey out of it this year and be able to, you know, and then once the honey's over, then you got to just move on to
Yeah.
the next step.
Yeah, there's always steps in beekeeping, that's for sure. And before we get into some of the other topics I have planned for tonight, I was wondering if you could briefly share us kind of who you are and kind of how you got into beekeeping, if you could.
Yeah, sure. I just actually passed my 10 years with beekeeping on the 27th of April. I remember back then in 2012 actually is when I kind of started my interest was peaked a little bit about it. I kind of got a little bit of interest in beekeeping. I really grew up kind of a weirdo. I kind of was always interested in insects and bugs and things like that, which is interesting. I guess as a little boy, that's not all that weird, but
Yeah.
I just always kind of studied them and was interested in insects. And I had when I was like in I think the first grade or second grade, I had an insect collection that I ended up using for my whatever it was ninth grade. I can't remember what the ages were, but anyway, I had an insect collection where I had the insects pinned and marked and everything when I was just a little kid, and so I was
Yeah.
really interested in them. But then I really kind of got away from it. I was more my main focus for a long time was sports. Then I got married, had a family, and then back in 2012, there was a I did home health physical therapy at the time. I was at a patient's house. He had a couple, had some hives out in his backyard, and he started talking to me about them. I was fascinated, and then somewhere around that time, there was a talk at a general conference of our church where one of the leaders got up and talked about the honeybee and how the bees work together and kind of compared it to the church and everything like that. It was really interesting. He gave all the statistics about the number of bees in a hive and just all the trivia, all the tips or tidbits of information that we learn about with bees and the things they do. And I was intrigued by it. So I kind of decided to get into it. My dad was really sick and he passed away in January of 2013. And so I asked my mom what she thought about putting a couple of hives up on the farm. I thought it would be fun to just play with them a little bit. And then on April, it was like a Monday or Tuesday of that year. I just in April, late April, I knew I needed to get some bees if I was going to get them. I had a friend that, and I had a friend that had bees, and so I asked him what I could do, and he kind of helped me walk me through the process. I knew nothing about what actually it looked like on the inside of a hive. I couldn't remember I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what frames meant. I didn't know anything about it. But that Saturday I had my bees. That morning I went and I went to my buddy's house, and he kind of took me through some hives to see what the different bees looked like. And then I drove a few miles from there and picked up my first 2 colonies from my mentor and brought them home. And the rest is history. I've just been kind of addicted to them. And that's kind of my story, how I got started. And I really just didn't know what I was doing. I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing sometimes, but I just kind of figured out I had a really good mentor that helped me figure things out as far as if I'd see things. He even came out a few times and looked in my hives and helped me get through the difficult times and gave me a lot of information and just led me along the way. I couldn't imagine if I wouldn't have had a mentor, how tough that would have been for me. Back then, I don't think YouTube was as big as it is now. There wasn't much stuff online. And so anyway, but I've just kind of grown it from there. And now I'm down here in Southeast Alabama. I've got probably right now, I would say, I'm going to say between 100, 120 colonies, healthy colonies. I probably have a few more than that, but some of them are just kind of iffy right now. I don't know if the queens are mated or I'm not sure what's going on. So let's just say 110, 120 colonies right now. And, but I don't know that the numbers matter that much. It's more kind of what you want to do with it. And are your bees healthy? Are you keeping them alive? That's more important than, I have 100 hives, I have 150 hives, I have 50. That doesn't matter as much as the skill set that you have and meeting your goals. Everybody's a little different. Some people can get as much out of 20 hives, as far as like if they want to produce honey, they can build them up real strong and get as much out of 20 hives as other people get out of 50. It just depends on what you want to do, what your goals are. So I think we as beekeepers many times want to compare what we're doing with others and want to kind of sound like a competition, and it shouldn't be that way. That's not what we're trying to do out here. So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question or not, Grayson, but that's kind of, my little brief beekeeping history in a nutshell there.
Yeah. And whenever we got into beekeeping, it was 2017, 2016, probably 3-4 years after you probably got started, it seems like. And we watched YouTube a little bit. There was David Burns on there were some other guys. Basically, the way we got into beekeeping is just basically we didn't have no mentor. We had a guy like in Florida where we kind of went down and he showed us what bees were, but not really, step by step. But we basically learned most of everything that we know or I know on YouTube, which was a while back, and I still watch YouTube for information. If there's something I don't know about, I'll go on YouTube and search it up, or go on other people's channel and do that. And that was 7 years ago, 6 years ago. This is my 7th season, 6th year. It's been fun. I really do like the challenge of it. Of course, as you said, it doesn't really matter as how many people or how many halves each person has. Just there's people who do that have 20 halves, does as much as 50, 100, and all that different kind of stuff. So I like that too. And we're having good flow down here right now. It's probably similar to you in making a little honey. Got nukes. Kind of making some nukes up, kind of getting them ready. Just to kind of bump up the numbers just a little bit, not too much. Maybe 20 in the next few years, maybe 30. You never know what bees will do. Just especially because sometimes numbers can be a little different because bees expand pretty quickly. And all that different kind of and stuff. But this is a question I wanted to ask. Quick, small question is, let's see. Yeah, since you have 110, 120, what's your expansion plans? Do you have anything in particular?
Yeah, right now I'm just kind of I'm kind of trying to decide what I want to do next. Do I want to grow and really have more bees, or do I just want to get better at what I'm doing? And I've kind of decided right now to stay at that 100 to 150 range and just try to get better, just try to have better bees. Is kind of my goal right now. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. Nothing.
Yeah.
So
right now I'm at I still don't really like to count everything, especially because sometimes especially a lot of my queenless splits, I have halves that have virgin queens. I actually have 2 halves that have virgin queens. I've been in them today just kind of looking through, peeking, seeing what there is in there. And there was some virgin queens in there, and I have one half that has a mated queen, and I'm surprised how good she is. I made a video about it a while back. I think it was a few days ago. And I've been pretty busy out in the bee yard. Definitely pretty busy. I bet it's busier for people who have 100 hives, like you, Bruce, and other people. Right now, I
Yeah.
feel pretty busy. Trying to take care of I guess I'd say 10 or 11 hives compared to 100 hives. So maybe in the future I'll expand more quickly. But I'm just gonna kind of expand slowly and just let it kind of roll with the flow. It's kind of what I like to do. Just kind of ease on
Sure.
into it and go wherever I go, wherever the bees take it. Because bees will
Mm-hmm.
expand and all that different stuff. And another thing that kind of stimulates to expansion is what kind of splitting method do you like? Whenever of course, I already caught myself a little cutout. A lot of people called it a mini cutout because it was just in a 5-gallon pail and it had comb. Everybody called it that. So I'd say it was like 1 year hive. But what kind of splitting techniques do you like to use whenever you're trying to prevent swarming and all that different stuff?
My favorite kind of splitting technique is the favorite kind is just to shake them all below an excluder and then pull
Yeah,
brood above, and then the queen's down below and you can easily pull it away. And that's my favorite method. But I've tried all different kinds of things. I've tried walk away splits. I recently ordered some queens from Corey Stevens, and
yeah,
I had to pull some splits in a hurry, so I just went and I kind of did little 2-frame splits. Like I put them in nukes, like I put a frame of brood and a frame of food in a nuke with maybe 2 frames, just maybe 2 to 3 frames is what it was, and with some bees, and that would give them a chance to kind of some of that brood would hatch out. And then I dropped the queen cells in when I got them from Corey,
yeah,
taped the end on them, and waited until it had been 6 or 7 days, and then pulled the tape off. And I did that Friday. And so those queens are hopefully they're virgin queens. Hopefully they're flying and getting mated. And
yeah,
so that's kind of what I'm doing there. But I've tried, man, just so many different ways to do splits. But
yeah,
those are, they're the most, I think the easiest and the most consistent way to split is to shake them below a queen excluder. If you're kind of have a hard time finding the queen, shake them down there, all the bees. Like if you got a double deep, even if you got a single deep, shake all the bees down. If you got a single deep, you don't have to worry about it. But you need to take some brood out and shake all the bees off the brood, and then you can put some new foundation or comb in there, and draw and comb down there, and then move the frames of brood above that don't have any bees on them. Just put a second box on there, put the frames of brood above, however many you want to put in your split, and then just cover the hive up. You don't have to fill the whole thing up with frames. You can just put 3 frames up there, 4 frames, whatever. And then those bees, the nurse bees, will work up to the comb.
yeah,
And then you come by like a day later, even a few hours later, but a day later, you just pull those frames out, stick them in the nuke box, and take them away. And then they're queenless, and you can add a queen or a cell or whatever you want to do at that point in time. So that's my favorite way to do it. I've done probably hundreds of splits that way. It is a
yeah,
little more time consuming. It's 2 steps, whereas if you just do the other types of splits, you can do right there and you're okay with it. So
yeah.
that's in a nutshell, that's kind of my favorite way to do it.
Yeah. I like to I've been trying out different methods and I know there's a bunch of different methods. You have walkaway splits, you have the Damari method. And I've been just doing I like to go by like 3-4 frames of brood larvae, put it in a nuke box and kind of let the bees raise the queen. I have some splits. I have one split, the one that has the mated queen. It's doing pretty good just because, because I just got that new bee art. I'm sure many people saw that new video a while back, but I kind of we have 40 acres. So one side of the 40 acres is our bee yard, and the other side, I put a new bee yard there just for drone mating, because just to see if that will help my drones and everything. And I think it is because one of my queens came back pretty good. So I think that's definitely a sign that it has paid off. And in my video, I talked a little bit about I saw dead drones on the ground, and some people will say that that's bad, but that just lets me know that they've been mating with a virgin queen, and it could very well be one of my queens that I have. So I think that's another good thing. And that's just kind of what I like to do for splitting. It's pretty simple. I just put 4 frames. Sometimes I'll even do 3 frames of brood and set them in there and let the bees make the queen cells. And after that, I'm kind of pretty much done. And then give them 4, 5, 6 weeks. I usually like to give them 4 weeks. Typically, I like to do 5 weeks, but it just depends on my timing and everything. Because sometimes I have so much splits going on, I kind of forget what days I'm supposed to go out for each split. Sometimes I have to put reminders, or I'll forget, or I'll go out early, or I'll go out late, or something like that. But that's just kind of another splitting method I like to use. That's just a splitting method. It's kind of similar to just putting 4 frames of brood along with a queen cell. Kind of similar, just letting the bees kind of make the cells. And let's see. I think we got some questions, because the one thing I know about live streams I've learned over the last 6 months is that the comments roll by fast, so I'm not able to really see all the questions. I'm just trying to make sure we didn't miss any up here, just to make sure.
Wow, yeah, they did come in fast, didn't they? I haven't been looking at them that close.
Me neither. Let me see. I guess there's no questions. Anybody wants to ask questions, feel free to. I just want to make sure, because sometimes these live streams roll down until I miss every single one, and I never answer one. So that's just something that always happens to me whenever I'm doing these live chats. But they're pretty fun to do.
Hey, can you put up that comment from Philip Morse? I made a little mistake, Grayson, real quick. If I could I hate to do this in the middle of your thing, but I just set up before I got on here, I set up this the Stream Team broadcast for Wednesday night, and for some reason it's scheduled in YouTube for tonight, and so people got notifications of it, and so they're over there waiting for me to come onto my channel, but I'm over here on your channel. I'm not sure why it did that, because I'm looking at StreamYard right now and it says it was supposed to be scheduled for then. So anyone who might be over there, if you could just let them know that I'm over on Grayson's channel right now, and they can come watch us over here. And if you want to do that, but anyone, I see Philip, maybe you could go in there and leave a comment and say, hey, go over to Grayson's channel. I don't know why that happened. Typically when you schedule on StreamYard, it goes directly into YouTube, and I don't know what I did wrong, but anyway, just to let you guys know, little public announcement there, and maybe we can get some more folks on this live tonight. I'd hope so, Grayson, but that's one reason I wanted to go ahead and announce that. So I don't know how to fix it right now. I may need to just go in there and delete it, but anyway,
that happens. And you know, sometimes you accidentally schedule it wrong, and definitely technical stuff that happens during all this, YouTube, and sometimes you'll forget. But I think sometimes that happens to me sometimes as well.
Sure.
It's pretty funny how that happens. But since, now that we're kind of in May, we're into honey flow. I think I want to talk a little bit about mite treatments. Of course, I'm kind of, right now I'm not really on the biggest stage of, treating mites. I treated before, I think in February, just because I like to either treat before or after a flow. I just thought we'd talk a little bit about that. What kind of mite treatments do you like to use, and when and how do you like to do it?
Well, right now it's kind of hard because a couple things. Number one, you're getting in the time of the year when, you got honey supers on the hive. And so there's a lot of treatments you can't use. Like you can't use the Apivar, the Apigard, anything Amitraz based. A lot of the products you can't use right now. The other problem is it's starting to get hot. And so you can use things like Formic Pro or Mite Quick Strips, things like that with the honey on. But if it gets above 85 degrees during at least the first few days of the treatment, then you get in trouble there.
Yeah.
And so you just got to be careful that you're going within. It's kind of tough to treat for mites. Frankly, right now, it's a little bit difficult to do that. And so I'm actually going in here and just, anyway, deleting this video. Right. Okay. I'm sorry. But yeah, so basically you need to the best thing I think to do is to try and get the mites under control earlier in the year if you can, like in the wintertime, January, February. It's tough to treat for mites right now. And so my strategy this year has been I really hit them hard like in the fall, and then I also hit them hard kind of throughout the winter with oxalic acid and just some different things. I tried Apigard last year. I did some Apivar, Apivar when it was still hot after the honey came off. Then I tried Apigard in the fall, and then oxalic acid stuff kind of through the winter, a few treatments with that. And now I actually have a Formic Pro on a fair number of colonies. My pollination bees came back, and the temperatures have been really good for Formic Pro. And so I've got Formic Pro on the colonies, and so I'll see how they do. It has been perfect temperatures for it. The day I treated, I think it was like 80, low 80s, and then it hasn't been. It's been like in the 70s and 60s, 70s, and low 80s since then, and so it's been perfect treatment for it. And so that's kind of what that's kind of what I've been doing there is just that. Now it's difficult. That's been my big problem the last few years is I haven't known how to address the mites during the honey flow. And the idea I think I've learned a little bit from Ian and from some other people is you try and knock them back before honey flow starts, really, really knock them back hard in the early spring, winter and early spring. And then hopefully that'll keep them at bay until you actually take the honey off. And here it's too hot. Like you can't use, Formic Pro in the summertime. Here it gets, if it's above 85 degrees, you're in trouble. And those are daytime highs. And so, we're about done with that here soon. It's a little cooler than it is usually right now here in Alabama. We're looking at the next few days of being in the 70s. It's just been perfect, beautiful weather. But that's kind of my strategy. Just kind of, I try different things. I've been testing for mites with the alcohol wash. And I've been doing, just trying to follow up, and that's helped me kind of get an idea of what works for me here and what doesn't. And so that's kind of my strategy with the mites. I'm still trying to get some of that figured out. The other thing is I'm trying to bring in some more mite resistant type bees. I've got some here from Corey Stevens coming. I've got some queens coming in from Texas, a guy down there that, I'm just going to try some of his. He is a treatment free guy, but he's had good success over the years. He has lots of colonies and does well, but his bees I think stay pretty clean. So I'm going to try some of his. And of course I got Greg's queens, which actually seem pretty rugged. Greg doesn't advertise his as being mite resistant, but they seem to do pretty well. They're pretty rugged bees. And so, I've really enjoyed using his and I got some from Jose and just different people. I'm trying right now. You asked earlier what my goals are. It's just to kind of try and get my genetics kind of figured out and kind of, maximize those genetics and get better with that. And I think as I do that, then I can have better, stronger bees. And if I have 100 really super strong colonies that can make a lot of honey or do whatever I want, then that's better than having 150 that are kind of, a lot of them are kind of weak and not very strong and not productive colonies. And so my goal is to kind of strengthen what I have and get better at doing what I do before I try to grow significantly. If I end up with 150, 200, that's one thing, but I don't think I will this year. I'm going to try and stay probably at most 140, 150, but who knows if I even get up to that number this year. I think I probably will, but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you're talking a little bit about the Formic Pro. So how is the Formic Pro working out for you? Because I know I haven't tried Formic Pro. I've heard a lot about it. And
it worked. It worked. I did it on 2 colonies in my backyard, and it worked extremely well. What happens is, or at least what happened in both of those cases, is it seemed like the one colony was pretty strong, but it had a really high mite load, and I think it had 30 mites, and it knocked it back to 6. But I did it wrong. I took the paper off. You don't take the paper off. You leave the paper on there, and so, but it still dominated the mites. The temperatures were good. Everything was perfect. And then when I did the follow-up video to that, after I'd done that wrong, I just put the Formic Pro on another colony because I didn't want to waste it. And I didn't check for mites or anything, but that hive was actually kind of weak. It wasn't weak, but it had kind of a spotty breed pattern. It wasn't a really pretty breed pattern. And, I took it off, and then I went in there yesterday and went through it. And it's doing really well. It looks really good in there. The bees are doing well. And so it almost seems like it does knock the queen back a little bit, but then she comes back and lays with a vengeance and lays a beautiful breed pattern. And right now they're currently on the pollination bees that were strong enough. They weren't all strong enough, but the ones that were. And I haven't been back in those to follow up. I'm going to go back in them probably this weekend. I'm going to go back in there and see how they're doing. So that's still to come. I'm not really sure what that's the first time I've ever tried on more than just a couple of colonies. So I went ahead and just pulled the temperatures were perfect. Conditions were right. And the bees, I only put it on the ones that I felt were strong enough. You got to have at least 5 frames of bees in there. It needs to be a pretty strong colony to do it. And the other ones that, the bees, when they came back from pollination this year, they didn't have a lot of brood in there. And so I felt like I could hit the ones that I didn't do Formic Pro with oxalic acid, because there really wasn't a lot of brood in there. And so that's kind of what I did. The weaker colonies just didn't have significant brood in them. And so I think it was pretty good timing. We'll see how it all works out. But I think it's a good product. I think you can definitely use it in the South. I've always been scared of it.
Yeah.
But I think you can use it in the South as long as you obey the rules and you use it properly with the right temperatures. And I don't see any reason not to use it here anymore. I used to not even consider it because of the heat, but use it early in the year, like now, and then use it in the fall. The only issue in the fall is if you want to be building winter bees and you put it in there and it's it shuts the queen down and you still want her to lay some more eggs, building up to winter, then that could be an issue. But I don't know that it's really going to be much of an issue. As long as the temperature's right, pretty much any time of year, I think you can use it, except for in the summer when it's way too hot.
Yeah. And we got a question here from Philip Morris, and he asks, Bruce, where do your current genetics come from? Swarms or local queen providers?
Okay, what I've done, Philip, and that's kind of what I'm trying to tune in a little bit now. When I started keeping bees, I just got my first couple of hives from my mentor. And, he is a successful beekeeper, has been for years, and has, he's had up to hundreds of colonies. And I think a lot of his genetics, nothing that I have or that I got originally was considered to be a Italian bee or a Carniolan bee. It's just kind of just a queen. And it's kind of some Varroa, kind of some mutt genetics, I think. I don't really know what they were. And then I just kind of, I built genetics off of mostly his kind of stock, South Alabama stock here. And he does order bees, queens in sometimes. He's done that for years. He did it back then. So I really don't know, but he actually made queens. He actually bred queens back then. And so that's where it all started. And then I just kind of started the next year, started catching swarms, and I started doing a few splits here or there. I started ordering a few queens just from different companies. And so honestly, my foundation of my bees has been local Alabama stock is my foundation, because I've gone all over this area and caught swarms. That's kind of how I built my original numbers. And, but then I started being a little bit more intentional. I would order queens from Kona queens out in California. I've ordered them from several different people. I can't even name all the ones I've ordered them over the years. I've always felt like I need to have some, introduce some diversity. And the last few years, I've used a lot of cells just from some local people, around here, some queen breeders kind of in this area, and just some pretty professional queen breeders. Some of them you might have heard the names of them, and some of them not. But I've just bought mated queens and introduced cells, and so I'm starting to kind of try to hone it in though to get a desired line. I think that the Alabama bees are pretty rugged; they're pretty tough, but some of them are a little spicy, and more spicy than I want them to be. And so I'm trying to figure out how to tone that down a little bit, but keep the same toughness of the bees around here. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to, like I introduced some queens from Greg last year from, Ohio up there. He calls them his, I think, Caucasian Appalachian mutts, the pink, Crypto pink queens. And most of them are doing pretty good. Whenever you buy, I think this has been my experience with buying queens from queen breeders. If you order like 20 queens, you're going to have most of them are, if it's a really good breeder like Greg's, most of them are going to be really strong. You're going to have a couple that may not make it. And then some are going to be, kind of in the middle. And frankly, when we introduced those queens from Greg last year, it was a really difficult time of the year. It was in July and it was in a dearth, and I'm amazed they got accepted almost, because we put them under a lot of stress. And so I did lose a few of those, but I do have some of them. And I'm going to try and get a video here of a couple of the things that are going on with some of those bees and just how beautiful they are and what they're doing. And so I've got some from Greg. I got some from Corey coming in for the VSH traits, and first time really introducing virgin queens. I'm going through that right now. Last year got some from Jose, the California beekeeper, Jose Uribe, and some from a local guy down south. So I kind of to answer the question is I've introduced genetics from all over the place, and now I'm kind of trying to really observe the traits of my bees, and hopefully I can end up with a more consistent stock over time. And that's kind of where my goals are. But all I can do is call my bees, honestly. Overall, I can just call them Alabama mutts or Alabama hybrids, maybe, because I've introduced a lot of queens from other people. a lot of diversity, but most of them, it's just, I'm gonna call them my Alabama hybrids, I guess you could say, because it's just all
Yeah.
different kinds of genetics, everything from Italians to Carniolans to Caucasians to just all kinds of stuff to, hybrids from other parts of the country. But we're getting there. They're getting better overall. And that's what I like about what's going on here. I think my bees overall are getting better.
Yeah. I like to use Italian. I got some Italians from, I forgot, just a local nuke person. He had like 100 nukes, I think is what he had. A pretty big beekeeper. I really didn't know who it was. I can't remember her name or anything. But anyway, we got those nukes, and I really liked the genetics. So what happened was they went into winter kind of weaker. People, if you saw that one, like, what was it, the blue hive, the one that at least my strongest have, that one went into winter a little weaker. I kind of fed them, and somehow over the winter they grew pretty strong. And when they came out of winter, they were just blowing up. So then I added Never Deep. They went up to that, making honey. So I kind of expanded my line onto that because I really like that and some others. I really like the Italian. And I also do like the swarm genetics. Now, that's something I do want to talk about real quick before we get into anything else. As anybody knows, that I caught that little 5-gallon swarm removal, and it was kind of weird or unusual to see a hive in that unusual place. But they had comb, they had a good laying queen, they were small. I really didn't know because they looked pretty small. They didn't look like they were much of a good hive or anything. But then right when I got them in that box and gave them comb, that queen kind of went pretty good. They a nice, very good brood pattern. That's what I really look for in all my genetics, is just because I really like to have a good laying queen. Queens are one of my things I really like to see. Good queens, and I forgot the little sayings there by Cayman, but that's just kind of how the swarm hive is going. That hive, for some reason, they are a little more spicier. I'd have to say that. Right when you get in that hive, they don't like you, and I'm just guessing it's just a Russian. But I'm used to that. I always, whenever I break into a hive, I'm used to having bees around me. A lot of beekeepers, even my age, would be scared to death about that. And that just you just think that somebody my age or even older would be scared of mean bees, but I'm not really even scared of them. If you're scared, they're gonna be more mean at you because they can sense all this pheromones of you being nervous. So that's something else about that. And another genetic thing, I have a friend on on the beekeeping channel who's going to send me a VSH queen, and that's going to be interesting since now we're on the VSH topic. So, what are you looking for in your VSH? I guess we can just talk a little bit about VSH. I had Corey Stevens on a live chat, a little bit ago. It was like a month ago, and I know you had him to talk to him. I learned a lot about VSH. Just tell us a little bit about kind of where you're looking for into the VSH line.
Well, VSH stands for Varroa sensitive hygiene, which means specifically they are hygienic bees, but specifically versus Varroa. And basically, what they're looking for with those bees is that the bees are able to stop the reproduction of the mites. And there's actually a couple of really good videos out just recently from Natalie. She did a video on it. And beekeeping with Natalie, and also I think Nathan from Duck River Honey did they went up and visited with Corey, and they Corey shows. The ones I watched were from Natalie. I haven't seen the ones from Nathan yet. I need to watch those, but Natalie actually shows him actually assessing those queens or the brood and the method they use, the Harbo testing. But I just want to see them. I'm trying to just introduce a more Varroa sensitive stock that's going to hopefully keep the mite loads down. I'm not opposed to treating, but I think if you can have a more rugged and tough bee that's more resistant to the mites, that's a good thing. And so I think if we can help spread those genetics throughout the country, it can help with the Varroa problem. And I'm still probably going to treat them. And I may get to the point someday, if I can find the time, to actually do some of that same testing that Corey does, but I just don't have the time right now to do that. I can do the mite washes, but to do what he's doing, I would love to do that, but I just can't figure out how to find the time to do that right now. And so, I also Ashby Miller. Has Ashby been on this channel yet? I don't know if you've had Ashby on. I know you've
Not
had
yet.
some other
I'm
people,
thinking about them. Sometime soon have them on.
but talking to Ashby and talking to Corey, and then of course Greg. Greg is a queen breeder, and he looks into all this, and just all the stuff floating around in my head. I kind of so really, I'm just looking for bees that are going to be more mite resistant. That the mites are going to just take the hives out, and then but I want to maintain. I'm really just getting more and more of a desire to work with the nice bees. I just posted yesterday on Facebook. I guess it was a story. I don't think it was actually a post. It may have been a post or a story, but I have a hive in my backyard right now that is they're so gentle. You open them up. This is a big double deep. It had 2 honey supers packed out with honey. They're packing the honey in better than almost any other bees I have right now. They're just gentle. They just work on the frames. They're just such a joy to work. You can almost work them without anything. I'll wear a veil, but you can almost work them without even a veil. And that's what I really want to see. That sort of attitude and production, but also be mite resistant. I think that's what everybody wants. And so that's kind of where I'm headed with it. I'm just trying to kind of develop a good bee for this area.
Yeah.
Some Alabama rugged bees that are gentle. And a lot of people around here, their bees are just mean, and mine have been defensive over the years. Some still are, but the percentage of the gentle ones is getting to be bigger and bigger, and the mean ones are getting less and less. And I want folks to remember too, for those who may not be that familiar with beekeeping, that even quote unquote gentle bees can have days where they're not gentle. If you go into them when a storm's coming in, or if there's a dearth and they've been kind of robbing each other and trying to test each other, there are going to be times, at least in my experience, when even your quote unquote nice bees may be a bit defensive. And so just because your bees are a little bit feisty one time when you go in them doesn't mean you have mean bees. It's just one of those things. I think some people are like, well, my bees are they're getting mean. They're too mean. And then you might go in them a month from now if there's a good flow going and they're perfectly gentle. So just kind of give your bees a little credit and don't get too aggressive with them or upset with them if they're mean one time when you go in them, because who knows if there was a skunk or some kind of animal, scratching the hive the night before. You just really don't know what they've been through. And so
definitely.
Anyway,
a lot of times,
kind of go ahead.
Because a lot of times, bees will have their grumpy days, even though you have a very nice bee. Bees will get their grumpy days, like you said. I've had that all the time. I have a nice bee that gets kind of grumpy with me, and sometimes I'll have a hive that's usually spicy, that's a little more calmer, and you never know what goes on with bees. And then, like you said, skunks or even little other creatures or wildlife could be messing with the bees. Could get them kind of mad, or the dearth, we have some dearths, a little bit. They may, they're robbing each other, that stuff just happens. And, that's just kind of how everything flows out according to genetics. I'm kind of looking forward to getting some of the VSH bees. I'm going to make some splits sometime. Once I get these queens in, make a few splits, put the queens in and try them out. I'm pretty excited for that. See how the VSH works. And I've heard a lot about it, but I don't really have much firsthand experience with it.
Hey, Grayson, you mentioned earlier about how one of your hives is kind of fussy or a little bit spicy. You mentioned you thought they might be Russian. Do you have some bees that for sure are Russian bees, or yours mostly just kind of local bees, or bees that have descended from those original nukes that you had?
Yeah. So usually, most likely, I don't really buy much of nukes from out of Alabama. A while back, when we got into beekeeping, we got hives from Florida. But usually, I have like local beekeepers around my area, maybe like in Andalusia, Alabama, not too far away from here. I'm sure you've heard of it. Cool town. And a little outside there is where we got some of our little Italian nukes. And then before that, which was a few years ago, even like in Troy at the theater, we met up with somebody who gave us nukes. So I'm not for certain. I'm not for certain that they're Russian, but I'm just kind of guessing.
Well, and it's hard to really. Honestly, you just don't know. I don't think all Russian bees are feisty, and I don't think all Italian bees are nice or carniolans. And so there's just, my opinion is, and folks on here might not agree with me on this, but I just believe that most bees out there are going to have a combination of a lot of different things. Because if you think about it, whenever that queen mates, you want her to mate with as many drones as possible, 20 to 40 or even more if they can. And so You got genetics from all over the place, especially if they're mating with feral bees that are out there in the woods, or if you've had, colonies from different places and they've swarmed off. And so you got bees out there in the trees. And so I'm kind of, when people say, what are your genetics? I pretty much just say, I think it's a combination of everything. And because I know I've got a little bit of Italian, Carniolan, Caucasian, Russian, probably a little bit in there too. I've probably got a little bit of everything in my bees, and some, I'll have bees that are different colors in the same hive because of the drones that they made, that they mated with and stuff like that. And so I know that some people specifically try to get Russians. They really like them because they're very frugal and they're very hard workers, and the same thing kind of with the Caucasians. And so, but what I'm trying to do is breed a bee that's not any specific type of bee. I just want a good, strong southern bee, that can withstand the rigors and the dearth and things like that down here in the South, and also be able to produce honey quickly and build up in the spring because we have such a short honey flow. And then I just want to work nice bees. I'm tired of, I can suit up. I do suit up. I can do it, as you've seen in my videos, but I want to get to the point where I get bees that most of them are gentle. And so Hill Hives, I think, was it Hill Hives that asked the question about requeening the mean hives
right here. So requeening I guess you meant to say strong, spicy hives early or after harvest.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure that out. Probably the way that I've toned my bees down the most is by making splits and introducing the genetics from queen breeders that are, like commercial breeders and stuff that have gentle bees. Like Greg's, for example, I just made splits and put those queens in there. Same thing with Jose. Same thing with a lot of the queen cells I've gotten have been from reputable breeders that are known to have good, strong bees and gentle bees. And so, I don't always go in and just kill the queen in those nasty colonies, but I break them down in the spring usually. And so I'm turning one hive into at least 2 or 3, if not more. And so now you're getting all those genetics, those gooder, those better genetics as far as attitude in the area. And so there's more drones out there. And eventually, if they're just super nasty and I'm just want to get rid of her, I will eliminate that queen. But I have had some really good producers. You get into March and start of April, and you've got a hive that you find out is a little bit nasty, and then it's in double deeps, and you're starting to stack honey supers, and it's just hard for me to go in there then and kill that queen. I know she's producing drones. I know that's happening, but my idea is just flood the area with better genetics, and ultimately you're going to have an overall better product. And that's kind of what's happening slowly. I would probably be quicker. I would quick change the genetics quicker if I went through and killed every queen, especially the ones I don't care that aren't perfect, and replaced them. That's the way to immediately change your genetics around and get what you want, hopefully. But I just can't. First of all, I can't afford to buy. I just don't want to buy that many mated queens. And second of all, it's turning around. I don't want to eliminate all the local genetics because they're tough and they're rugged and they do well. So I don't want to eliminate all the local genetics. I just kind of want to gradually move them in a direction that's more desirable for me. Hopefully maintain the desirable genetics and getting rid of, kind of phasing out some of the bad ones. That's kind of what my theory and philosophy is, but we'll see what happens. And so, to answer Hill Hive's comment there, his question, I really don't have a specific time to do it. I just kind of am trying to gradually overcome that. And if last year, say 30% of my colonies were mean and this year it's 15%, then that's moving in the right direction. And I have had some that were so bad though, that I just had to replace the queens. Like I just had to do it because they were almost unworkable, and it's just no fun working those kind of colonies. But most of my bees aren't like that. Most of them you can deal with, and unless it's a really bad day, you can usually deal with them, pretty much all of them now.
Yeah, definitely. I like the, local genetics. At the same time, I do like to have some nice genetics. But for me, I'm kind of the same. I kind of like to just, have the local genetics because they're tough and they know the area. They know like our temperatures. So I just have, I don't really know exactly what I have. I'm kind of, I just say mixed around. I'm not exact sure that all my hives aren't the same genetic. I just kind of make do and kind of figure out which hive is good for each thing. And I found that some of my like little more meaner, I'd say spicier hives that I have are pretty good for honey production, and I really like them for that. And they do a good job on drawing comb. And there's just some little small itty bitty different things, but at the same time, I'm not really a organized person. I'd say that organized on the genetics. I just have things kind of placed out. I have a little BR that has little Italians and maybe Russians, or I know I don't have an Africanized. That's a question I a lot of times hear. How do you know if you have an Africanized hive? Then I know we don't have any Africanized hives down here. Yeah, I hear that question.
People look at my videos and some of them, they're a little bit spicy and they'll be like, you've
Yeah,
got Africanized bees. And I'm like, I honestly believe, and there's some folks in here from Texas, and they may have seen some Africanized bees or actually been around some Africanized bees, but I will tell you, I don't think anyone around here has ever seen anything close to
yeah,
Africanized bees. Even a spicy hive, I think that I've had, I mean, I think an Africanized hive would be 10 times worse. You just about can't, you're unworkable with, unless you have a complete body armor suit on, your ankles taped, an entire suit. You can't mess with Africanized bees, and
yeah,
they'll still even sting you through that. They are just, if you can imagine, just say, for example, you have 100 guard bees, which you probably have more, but just say you have 100 guard bees in a regular hive. I think Africanized hives have like 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 guard bees. They're just it feels like, I think the whole hive has come after you, and they don't let up. And so I think there might be little genetics, maybe a little genetic tendency in some of the bees around here, or maybe throughout the country, in certain areas that they're a little spicy. Maybe they've got a little gene or genetic of the Africanized bees, but I don't think that here in Alabama, in this area, any of us have seen anything even close to Africanized bees. That's just from watching videos from the killer bee man out in Arizona and different places like that, where they deal with those Africanized bees. I've never seen anything. Even my meanest bees have not even been close to that.
yeah.
So I don't think we have them. I know there have been as far as I know, there have been no confirmed cases in Alabama of Africanized bees. Not to say there aren't any here, but I don't think there are any confirmed cases. Not to say that there might be a little bit of a gene or a trait in some of them that, if we've got a bee that mates with 40 drones, and we've got, Carniolan, Caucasian, Italian, every other thing, Alabama mutts or whatever, there might be a little gene in there of Africanized in some of them, but I don't think we have any truly Africanized bees around here.
Yeah. I don't think so. I haven't heard anything confirmed about that. Of course, Africanized bees, like, they're much more faster, and they'll kind of fly after you a lot more longer distance. So if you have like a hive that follows you maybe 100, 200 feet, that's probably just one of your standard hives. I have hives that will chase me they'll kind of follow me for 70, maybe 90 feet. After that, they just kind of let up. But I hear Africanized go much more further, like in a mile or something.
Yeah,
And
they'll probably. I've heard up to a quarter mile, but it might be further. But yeah, they don't. Never. This is probably a good time to talk about what to do if you get into some really mean bees. I think it probably applies to any type of stinging insect that's super aggressive.
yeah,
Africanized bees, honey, just even mean bees or whatever. But what a lot of people, for some reason, people feel like if they spray the bees with water, if they jump in a water, body of water, that's the solution. So they may run for the nearest creek or river or lake, or they may try to go get the water hose and spray the bees off. But this is what I've heard, and I've never experienced true Africanized bees, but if it gets to the point to where they're really coming after you, you run as fast as you can in an opposite direction, in a straight line away from the bees. And it's really actually a good idea to pull your shirt up over your face, because one of the problems with the super aggressive Africanized bees is that they get into your mouth and your nose, and they can suffocate you. You can imagine how horrible that is. They go into the holes and the orifices. They try to get in there. And so even though it's going to be brutal, just cover your face somehow and run as fast as you can away from the bees, and get inside a car, inside a house, inside anything. Some bees will come in there with you, but you may have 50 bees in there with you, or 100 bees in there, as opposed to 2,000 bees. And so it's important to get, don't jump in a body of water, because, as you've probably seen when working with bees that are fired up someday or whatever, they don't just stop flying around immediately. Like if you jump in the water, they're not just going to quit flying and go home. They're still kind of flying around the area. So as soon as you bring your head up, they'll be on top of you again. So those are just some words of the wise. Just if you don't have a place to go into, run as fast as you can. Even if it's a mile away, just get away from them until they quit following you. and
Yeah.
you just got to get away from them. So that's the key, is get away from them, get in a closed area, and just don't stop at a water hose and try to spray them off. Don't jump in water. Just get as far away and as fast as you can. And that's key. And cover up your mouth and your nose and your eyes and
Yeah.
everything if you can too. So
Yeah. It's
that's just
Africanized
what I've
bees.
heard.
Yeah. I'm sure
I've
they have
never,
like more and stuff, but I don't think we have. I've never seen one, and I hope not to.
yeah.
And
Even with my bees, when they're crazy, like I did this the other day, I was down, I've got a new bee yard. I've got just 6 hives there, and I'm going to try and get at least a dozen out there. It's Applin Farms, where I sell a bunch of my honey.
yeah,
And I put the hives out there a couple of weeks ago, just went to check on them, see how they're doing. And I opened up one of them, and I was going to put a queen excluder on there, and I just had my veil on. The first hive I went in was just perfectly fine and docile. The second one, they were a little bit testy, and I kind of tried to shake the bees out of the honey super, which was dumb, with just a veil on, and they just came after me. And so I walked away from them, got in my truck, rolled all the windows down, and drove away a little ways away. And I found, if you'll get in your vehicle with all the windows down, I don't know about Africanized bees, but most bees, if you kind of drive away from them, the bees ultimately work their way out. You can roll the windows up and you can kind of just control things. But so many people just, they freak out. They close all their windows so the bees that are in there with them can still attack them. The bees can't get out, because the bees, once they realize they're inside a dark space or enclosed space, they try to get out the windows. They go to the light. And so I've noticed for years, and I will just drive away. I'll get in my car and I'll drive away until all the bees are out of the car, and then I roll up the windows, and then I can stop. I can get out. I can take my jacket off or change my jacket or whatever, and I can think about it. But if you just stick around, if you stay around, if you start flailing at the bees and just making a scene, and you don't leave the area, it's just not, they don't just leave. They're going to continue to come after you for the most part. You got to get away from them, however you need to do that.
Yeah, good advice. Another topic I kind of wanted to discuss, since now another thing, because we're in May, it's definitely a good time. Of course, now it's the honey flow, but since once you get in the dearth, whenever you feed, what do you kind of like to feed? I know you like to do a little open feeding. So what's your kind of feeding strategy on that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've typically been a little lazy. I've open fed my bees, and I try to keep, of course, you can't set the food right next to the hives and expect them not to do some robbing. But I found that if I put them a bit away, a little ways away from the colonies, and some people say it needs to be like 100 yards or 150 yards. My experience hasn't been, it has to be that far, as long as it's even 30 or 40 yards away. I haven't had issues. Now, I'm not saying to do that, because that goes completely against what a lot of people say. But I would like to get more into kind of trying to feed each hive individually in a way, whether either through bucket feeders or in hive feeders. As I've observed folks like Seth Hill, and Bob Benny, you see them do this a lot, as well as a couple of my buddies here, to Tyler, a Walker guy down here who raises nukes, and he actually just went commercial, went full time. Just feed. They just tilt the boxes back or move them over, and they just feed those in hive feeders, and they set the boxes back over. And of course, Greg uses the buckets. And so I think I would like to do a little more of that, but the open feeding, with my time limitations, it works well. The disadvantage to open feeding is that obviously the larger colonies will just suck up that food, and the weaker colonies will not be able to get as much. And so it kind of is, it gives your weaker colonies a disadvantage. And so that's one thing about it, but it's gotten me through the last few years. That's how I've done it, and it works well. It's just there's probably a better way to do it, but it does work well, and I've kept a lot of bees alive by doing it over the years.
Yeah,
Some states open feeding is illegal as well. I know. I think in Tennessee it's probably illegal, or maybe some others, but they say disease transmission or whatever. Okay. I mean, the bees are out there visiting flowers, and they're intermingling. And if you've got 20 or 30 colonies in a bee yard, they're all intermingling and just drift anyway. But that, I think, is the reason why in some states open feeding is illegal. Plus, if you think about it, if you have other beekeepers around, you're not only feeding your bees, but their bees as well. And so, you might lose some of that feed that way. So it's not always the best thing for everybody. But it's worked well for me for many years.
Yeah. And I've been feeding with the buckets. Of course, now I'm only feeding like the my nukes, like my 5-frame hives that don't have a queen. I'm not feeding any of my production hives, especially my strongest hives. I'm going through there to get. I have a hive that's going honey bound. I kind of got them under control. I took a lot of the honey out, and what I did was I knew that was probably one of my 1-to-1 sugar water feed. So I didn't want to make honey out of it. It would be my 1-to-1 sugar water, and I wouldn't want that. So I'll just let bees rob it out. So at least every hive could get it. And what I do is whenever they rob it out, I like to resource that drawn comb and use it for something else. So I like to put it back in hives and let the queen go back in there and start laying in it, and it works pretty good. I have a pretty bad issue with bees getting kind of honey bound. They do that pretty quick, so that's why I've been kind of slowing down on the feeding for some of the hives. But
Yeah,
my
right,
nukes are
right. Yeah, right now you probably don't need to be feeding a lot, maybe a little bit on those nukes that are trying to build up. But if you got a flow going,
yeah,
they prefer that nectar anyway. They would just rather go out and get
they
that as
do.
long as they have some foragers that can do that. I'm feeding just a very little bit. Like I caught that swarm last weekend, and it's not a ton of bees, and so I went ahead and put a little food on them. I put them in an apame yesterday and put a little food on them, and these splits I made with Corey's queens, I put a quart of food on them when I did it, and another quart when I put the queens in there. But a lot of those hives weren't even drinking that food down. I guess they're going out and finding a nectar flow somewhere, and so if there's a good flow going on, I mean, you can maybe do some feeding, but they will back way off on even taking that food. They really don't need it if there's a good flow. At least, and
Yeah,
that's my experience. That's what I believe anyway, especially if you're trying to put honey on the hives.
definitely. And I got a few more topics and a few questions. I have like at least 5 questions we'll leave for the end of the live chat. And I have a few more topics I want to discuss. The next one is something that I've been talking about to other beekeepers is, do you like to do anything to make money on beekeeping? Like, I know like making nukes to sell, or I know you guys do honey production. What's your kind of thing on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's become to the point to where that is probably the main reason I'm keeping bees. If I just wanted to have bees, to look in and have fun with it, I would back way back on the numbers. I would probably get down to 10 to 20 colonies, if I wanted just to do it, just to have bees. So it is it is a sideliner business for me right now. It is something that I'm doing it to make money. I do love the bees. I enjoy the bees, and I enjoy the challenge, but it is a money making endeavor. And so the primary way I've made money over the years has been honey. We've done a little bit of pollination here or there, and I've sold a few nukes here or there. I've never really sold any significant number of queens. I think one year I tried to graft and sold a couple of cells, but I've sold just a very few nukes. Probably the most nukes I've ever sold is 8 or 10 in a year. I just don't. I'm going to probably ramp that up a little bit in coming years. That's my goal once I get my genetics under better control. But honey's my biggest. That's really honey, and I sell some beeswax. So a fair amount of beeswax, and just whatever I come up with, I pretty much get rid of it. People reach out. I've got 3 or 4 people right now that really like the beeswax, and so I do sell a little bit of that. But last year we made about 7,400 pounds of honey. And if you average that, even if you just average $5 or $6 a pound, that's a fair amount of money when you figure it out. But now we figured out how much I made, and we made a fair amount, but we also spent a lot on supplies and equipment.
Yeah.
So our profit wasn't that great last year, but this year I've got equipment. I don't need to buy a lot of equipment this year. And so hopefully it'll become a little more profitable for us. But my biggest, like I say, pollination, biggest money maker has been the honey, though, by far. And
Yeah.
this YouTube thing is I make a little bit on the YouTube thing. It's not a lot, but it is a little bit that kind of helps the business as well. And one of my goals is to continue progressing and advancing the channel a little bit and trying to grow in that respect, and just provide content that helps people out, that people enjoy. That's kind of what my goal is. And I hope folks that are watching here feel that it's doing that. I don't know. It's sometimes I wonder, but that's one thing too with the YouTube channel. I'm trying to help, I'd like to make a little money with that, but the biggest thing is the honey. Philip asked how much I'm sitting on right now. I think we got about 10 to 15 buckets left out of 123. And so that's not too bad. And we're going to harvest here probably end of May, or between end of May and mid-June, probably here in the next month or so, a month and a half. And so hopefully we'll have quite a bit more, but this year so far it's not looking like a great crop for me, but we'll see what happens. Did I lose Grayson? Looks like I lost Grayson. Any questions while he gets back on here? Let me see what we got here. I did, DC, you were asking, or somebody was asking about the Roundup. And I know this is a controversial topic here, so I'll talk about that for just a second while we're waiting for Grayson to get back on. But the Roundup, I live in a neighborhood. My best location for bees is right here in my neighborhood. I can't have a ton of bees here, obviously, because I've got a 3rd-acre lot and I've got neighbors on every side. I think I got 4 or 5 swimming pools within a block and things like that. And so I got to be careful. And so obviously when you live in a neighborhood with people that are trying to keep their lawns manicured and the weeds down and their plants, they're going to be spraying Roundup. They're going to be spraying weed killers. They're going to be spraying stuff. We have a mosquito truck historically that goes through the neighborhood and sprays probably 30 to 40 feet from some of the bees, goes right by the bees and sprays that mosquito spray. And it's my strongest bee yard right here. It really is. And so I know that Roundup can have some wicked effects or some bad effects on the bees, but I have not experienced a lot of issues with it. I don't know that it's really been an issue for my bees. So I don't know. What I found when the biggest problems come with bees when it comes to sprays and so forth is they fly right through the mist. Particularly, obviously, if it's a pesticide. Like there was a time when the mosquito truck could go by like at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the bees are coming home then. And so those bees that would fly right through that mist, that I've seen laying dead in front of the hives, but it wasn't like the whole hive is dead. You've just got a few bees outside the hive. And it's kind of weird because I guess they sprayed when the drones were coming home because most of the dead bees were drones. And so I'm not super like anti-Roundup or anti-sprays. I think it just depends on if the bees happen to be flying through it or visiting those flowers right after they spray. That's when the problem comes in. Once that spray, I think, is done its job, I don't think it's too much of an issue. I've had bees right on cotton, right on big fields, and haven't had too many problems with it. So I've had very, very few cases where I'd walk up to a hive and just see piles and piles of dead bees from some sort of spray, I think. That's just my opinion. And I mean, that's no controversial. A lot of people may disagree with me. And obviously, if it's a man-made spray, it's probably not good for the bees, but I don't know if it's as bad as some people feel like it is either. But I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry
Michael
about
Buck
that.
says, yeah, that's Michael Buck says, I've used Roundup around my hives with no problems. And, I might be getting in trouble for this, but when I put those hives out at Applin Farms a couple of weeks ago, the Applins told me, hey, we got Roundup here if you want to spray around those pallets and keep the grass back. And so I sprayed right around the pallets and about a 2-foot stretch right around the pallets, and the bees are doing just fine. So anyway, that's just my opinion, and take it for what it's worth. It's worth about how much you paid for it. So whatever y'all think about that, that's just my opinion. I don't stress too much about it.
Yeah. Sorry about that little thing. The Wi-Fi kind of went out for a split second, okay. But kind of went out. But I do like I like to mostly do honey, small honey kind of thing, honey production, just a little bit, not big kind of thing, just enough to make a little cash off of it. And I did pretty good. I think last year I did pretty good, and I made a lot of honey. I sold a little bit of it, but I kept a lot of it. The bees made some good honey that year, but I kept a lot of it. The year before that, I made a good honey sale. And that's mostly what I really do for that matter of, making money with, the bees and just a little hobby. I'm hoping to make it a little bigger sometime, maybe some more hives, maybe up to 30 in the next few years. We'll see. Bees will split, bees will expand. So we're just going to see where it takes us. But I got one more topic, and this is the main topic of the live chat I kind of wanted to talk about. And then we got some questions. I'm sure maybe beekeepers have saved. And this is a topic I know you guys have been talking about, is intentional beekeeping. I was wondering if you could explain to us what you mean by intentional beekeeping and a little bit about that subject.
Well, I think it's important, and obviously I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. Like, I've become much more quote unquote intentional in recent times. But so many of us, when we start beekeeping, we really don't know what we're doing, and we read books and we kind of have an idea, but we just don't know what we're doing. And so we want to try everything. And I'm still doing some of that. I want to try everything. And, but I think what intentional beekeeping kind of what it means to me is that everything you do with your bees needs to have a purpose. You need to be intentional about what you do. If you're just going in bees and throwing frames around and you're just looking at them just to observe and look, if you're learning from that, that's one thing. And if you have a purpose for doing it, that's one thing. But just to get in them because you feel like you need to get in them, that's not really intentional beekeeping. If you're just breaking out, you're breaking your hives way down, splitting a lot, and you really, you don't really know what you're doing, or you really don't need that many colonies, and you're not really intentional about what you're doing, you don't have a purpose for why you're doing it, then that's not really intentional beekeeping. And so many people kind of go into beekeeping, they read some books, and they may have a year or so of success, or 2 or 3 even, and they kind of think they've got everything figured out, and then they crash and burn. But through a lot of those lessons and those trials you go through, you do learn the things that work and the things that don't, and you can become more goal oriented and intentional in what you're doing. So I think kind of what intentional beekeeping means to me is that, Cayman Reynolds talks about great queens, dead mites, and proper nutrition. It kind of boils around those 3 things to me. Like, how are you doing that? What's your plan to maintain great queens, to maintain the right genetics? What is your plan to control the mites? I mean, whether it's you treat like crazy and you just don't worry about it, but you do need to kind of see, for example, assess your mite situation and know what the need is and how the treatments are working, effectiveness. If you're just treating for mites with oxalic acid vapor a couple times a year and you're not checking to see if it's working, that's not intentional beekeeping. You know what I mean? You need to check before, do whatever type of treatment you decide to use, and then check after you're done and see if it worked. Otherwise, you really don't know. You can feel comfort in your heart and peace in saying I treated, but then if all your bees die due to viruses spread by the mites and you don't have any idea why, maybe that particular treatment wasn't effective for you in your situation. Even with the mite control, even if it involves bringing in some VSH genetics or trying to figure out how to do that, if you're intentional on how you do it, you're raising better genetics and you're working on that. That's one thing. Same thing with food. If you're feeding your bees with a purpose, if you have reasons for doing it, then that's another reason, intentional beekeeping. But it's just a matter of really having goals and a purpose for what you're doing, and I like the word intentional about what you're doing. And I think you can kind of put intentional beekeeping in the same category as sustainable beekeeping. If you're intentional with what you're doing, you're going to be able to sustain the bees. You're going to be able to be successful and learn over time and reach your goals. And your intentional change over time. Like, you may start off just, hey, I want a couple of colonies. You fall in love with it and you end up being a commercial beekeeper someday. So the goals and the intentions can change with experience, but you got to have a reason for doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
definitely. I hope that helped. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing us that, because that's definitely something it's good to be intentional about what you're doing, not all that different stuff. We got some questions here from some guys. If anybody wants to ask any questions, final questions before we end it off, I'm going to answer some of these. The first one is from, I guess the name is CD. If one wants to start a business with their bees, what's the best way to start? Honey, nukes, building, hives, selling, queens, wax. This kind of goes back to the making money.
Yeah, I would say just pick what you like the best. If you love the honey process, if you enjoy bottling it up and selling it to people and getting out in the community, and selling, you can individually, person to person. If you can work on, if you like to get out and try and do the side hustle and peddle it to stores and things like that, then honey might be the way to go. If you figured out kind of how to do it, if you have a good honey flow there, if you've got the ability to make a lot of honey, that's good honey, then that's definitely a way to make money. That's kind of been my main go-to over the years. Of course, with honey production, you've got to be able to get some comb built, because if you want to make honey, a drawn comb is like gold. You can just, once they draw it out the first time, you can keep putting it back on the hives over and over, year after year, and they'll just fill it up a lot quicker. Nukes, if you love making bees, nukes and queens and things like that, that's a way to go. You can learn how to make a good nuke. You can learn what that means. Good, clean bees that have a good attitude. You can develop that type of stock, and you can sell nukes that way to beekeepers. If it's just a few every year if you're a hobbyist, to some friends or whatever, that's one thing. If you want to grow that business, there's almost an unlimited potential if you have a quality product. And so then you got other products in the hive. You've got your lip balms, your beeswax, all different kinds of things, candles that you can do. but you just have to keep the bees. You have to try the different things and see what you enjoy the most, and then pursue that angle. And as you grow, if you have the ability to do it and you become more efficient, you can kind of reach out and do a little bit of all of it. Queen production is another area that people really enjoy, that can be a moneymaker for you. But you have to, once again, I can't emphasize enough, your product has to be good. I hesitate to, that's one reason I've hesitated to do queens and nukes a lot, is because I'm just worried about my product. And I know I've got strong bees, but I don't want to sell a hive to a brand new beekeeper.
Yeah.
And then them hate beekeeping because they're too spicy. You know what I mean? I don't want to do that. And so I'm trying to develop that product a little better. And I don't guarantee if I sell a nuke, I mean, they're going to be strong, I think, typically, because I usually sell my best ones, but I never tell them. I'm like, I'm going to tell people, look, I'm not going to guarantee these are going to be perfectly docile bees. They might be a little bit spicy, but I think they're going to be good bees for you. And if people agree to it, then I'll sell them a nuke here or there. But really, you just got to figure out what you like and then roll with that, and figure out what the market is in your area, because it varies from place to place.
Yeah, definitely. Another question from Mike Conley. Bruce, are you using any of Seth's bees?
I have not done that, but I thought about reaching out to Seth and getting some of his queens. Not sure if I'm going to get them this year or not. I've got some queens lined up from some other people, but that is a possible in the future. I may get some this year. I really don't know right now. I just want to see where I am kind of as the honey flow winds down going into the summer. Just see what my numbers are and how things look. I've noticed at the end of the year, at the end of the honey flow, is when I usually have some issues with colonies. They just kind of seem to run out of gas a little bit there in that summertime. And so I'll probably be replacing some queens then, and I may get some then if he has some available, but that is definitely on the horizon. And one of these days I'll get some from him, whether this year or in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. And one more question. This is the last one from Hell House, and I don't have it up here, but he says, how long for the honey flow in Alabama?
We typically have a privet flow that starts in mid-April, and goes through right now, and it's blooming a little bit now, probably into about mid-May and early to mid-May, and then the tallow kicks in mid to late May and goes on into June. But this year everything's weird. We do have some little smaller flows that happen throughout the winter and early spring. Just the maples, the tulip poplars depending on where you're at, the tulip poplar can be pretty big. But it varies. But really the main flows right here where I'm at typically are the privet and the tallow, some other stuff mixed in. And we have a pretty good fall flow, but I usually do that for the bees. But we're looking at typically about a 6 to 8 week flow. But this year, everything is like the privet has been mediocre at best so far, and the tallow is about to bloom a couple of weeks early. So we're going to have probably kind of a hot and heavy flow here early, and then it's going to be done. And so I'm really worried about what to expect here, at least right here in my area, because I don't really want to be having to keep bees alive from June through next year. Usually it starts in July or August even. And so this year it's going to be a little bit early maybe, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Another question from Michael Buck. A lot more questions coming in. We're going to try to answer them pretty quick. Bruce, how much is your retail by the pound 24 ounce in the pint jar?
The pint jar. I sell my pound. This is okay. I'm not sure where you're at, Michael, but here in Alabama, in my local area, my prices are actually a little bit low for my retail prices, but I sell a pound for $8, 2 pounds for $15. A pint would go for, I don't sell a lot of pints, but $11 to $12, and then a quart would go for, I think, $21. But those prices, I understand they're a little bit low compared to what a lot of people are charging in other parts of the country, but I have to move some honey. And so I got to sell at a price that is a good a good price point for me. I do, and I can't tell you the amounts because it kind of, it varies a little bit here or there, but I do sell, if I'm selling wholesale to stores and farmers, fruit stands and vegetable stands and stuff like that, I do give them a little bit of a discount so they can make a profit. But a lot of the stores around here selling local honey are selling like a pound for anywhere from $9 to $10 a pound. That's pretty much the going rate. And then of course, if you put it in the nice glass jars, that price changes and goes up a little bit too. So, but that's my basic plastic squeeze bottle, $8 for a pound, $15 for a 2 pound bottle. And that's what I spill. That's what I sell. Probably 95% of my honey is in those quantities.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess we better go ahead and wrap this thing up. I appreciate everybody who's watching. I appreciate you, Bruce, for hopping on here and joining us for an hour and 15 minutes. It's definitely been fun to talk to you and all that different stuff. And anybody who's, going out, coming in, I'd appreciate if anybody would, click the like button. That helps, the channel a lot, helps, us a lot. But I guess other than that, I guess we'll see you later, Bruce. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, and I appreciate everyone coming in. Before you guys get out of here, though, if you're not a part of Grayson's channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and let's get some likes in here, guys. We've had, I think, up to 45 or 50 folks on here. So before you get out of here, just hit that like button. I know Grayson would appreciate it, and share his channel. Grayson, one thing before you get off, I want to say to you, I'm a big believer in the YouTube thing, beekeeping and YouTube, and trying to get better each time you do something. And if you watch my videos, I'm always trying to improve. Some aren't as good as others, but I'm trying different things. But as far as the editing, I've really noticed you're upping your game, man. You're working on it. And that's, if you get even a 1% better with each video, you're going to go places. It's figure 100 videos, that's going to be 100% better. So just keep plugging at it, man, and keep working at it. I see some folks that really don't ever change. They don't change what they're doing. And they get irritated or angry when their channel doesn't grow, but you're going to grow because you're going to continue to work on it. I've seen that in what you're doing. You're working hard at it. So just a little encouragement there. Just keep plugging along and just trying to get a little bit better each day. And how old are you, Grayson? You're 14, right? 13 or 14?
13, turning 14 July 31st.
So you're 13 years old and you've already got this thing going. So I think that's incredible. And I think the future is bright. Everyone on here, I think, would agree the future is bright with our young beekeepers coming up. It's you and some other folks. Even Seth Hill he's like 23 years old. And so there's a real bright future for some of you young folks here on YouTube and in the beekeeping world. So keep up the good work, man. I appreciate you having me on tonight.
Definitely. I appreciate having you, and thanks for talking like that. I appreciate you.
All right, guys.
Well, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, Bruce.
All right. Welcome.